Well, Einstein said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it yourself. You should have a brief that's very clear who you're talking to, what you want them to know, what's your single-minded message, and what's your KPIs.
Most marketing campaigns fail before the creative team even opens the brief. Today, Sarah is going to reveal what's missing, and it's not what you think.
One of the other things that people tend to do is choosing an agency because you like the style of their work. If you're choosing an agency that has a style, you're buying that style. There are so many times that the clients say, oh, it's 80% of the way there. And that 80% is, I bought the style that I like, that's great. But the 20% is the important bit, which is, but you're not delivering to my brief.
Sarah will also share the key to a successful creative brief, the chemistry meeting that will guide you to your next favorite agency, and the listening test that immediately disqualifies the wrong partners. If you're not subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button now. Every week, we go deep with episodes like today's that give you frameworks agencies would charge 5 figures for. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Horizons Podcast, where I convince marketing leaders to spill their secrets for the rest of us. I'm your host, Nate Desmond, and today I'm sitting down with Sarah Admash. Sarah has worked both in-house and also agency side across startups and big tech companies that you would know like eBay, and she even finds time to run a nonprofit, Together Equal, in her free time. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nate. It's great to be here.
I wanted to start with this sort of interplay between in-house and agency side. You've done a lot of moving both directions. Many people go one way, but very rare to go both directions and go back and forth. How do you find moving between the two changes the way that you would, let's say, interact with agencies when you're in an in-house role?
That's a good question. It's very interesting. So I started with agencies. I come from an agency background. So I started with big network agencies. So I was they used to call it a bag carrier. I started off as an account handler before going into strategy. And you're called a bag carrier because you're basically the liaison between the client and the creative team. And the creative team are gods in the agency, and what they say goes. So you're then entrusted to go and relay this information to the client. And then the client is the bag carrier's god. So you have to relay the information. So you're basically a go-between. So I started off like that. And that teaches you a lot about the different dynamics between creatives. And you know, when I think a lot of clients don't really think they know, but they don't really acknowledge themselves, the amount of passion and work that a creative they put their heart and soul into a project. You know, if they miss the mark, it's not intentional. They've put everything into it. They genuinely think that what they've done is groundbreaking and amazing, and you know, there's so much passion that goes into it. So having that kind of skill to go between the two things and having that lens on everything really does, I think, set you up for success going forward. So whether you're in client side or agency side, that's a great thing. So I learned that a lot. I learned a lot about agencies and the passion and all the work that goes in the back end. You know, you're managing multiple accounts and multiple projects. So it's really, really interesting. So you have this really broad, holistic view of things. You get, it's a lot about the creativity and what that's delivering. But increasingly, I discovered that clients are getting frustrated because they're asking, what does this deliver? What can you guarantee me? And as an agency person, you're going, well, I don't know, because you're the one that's got access to all these figures, which you can't share with me. So there's this big frustration between client and agency, where the agency is doing all this brilliant creative work. It's moving the dial. People are talking about it, but you can't see what, and maybe you don't necessarily have quite the perspective, especially because it was an ad agency that I was working with. And it was back in the day, right? I'm a dinosaur. So we didn't have the visibility. We didn't have the visibility of what that was delivering on the business outcomes. But the clients wanting to be able to demonstrate that to their boards and demonstrate where the budget's going. And this has been going on for decades now. And the industry's got better at reporting on it. And then I went client side. And then I realized the pressure that the clients are under for the impact that marketing's having. So all of a sudden I'm like, and I think I always think that marketeers, well, a lot of marketeers are kind of like mechanics. We see things that are broken, we want to fix them, we want to make them better. There's, you know, you have a business challenge which you can address with marketing. So that's what you want to do. So we're all going in the same direction and we're problem solvers. But from an agency perspective, you're kind of frustrated because you're hamstrung because you don't have the access to this data. From a client side, you're frustrated because you can't really share the access to the data because it's, you know, very confidential. But equally, you need to be able to tell a story. And so suddenly you realize that bit when you go client side. So that's the bit that I really kind of, actually, I love it. And you kind of really begin to unpick it. And so I'm able to bring that to both sides. I'm like, right, okay, what are your KPIs? What are your KPIs that we can measure? What data can we share here? What narrative can we tell people? And I think that's super, super important. And I think you didn't really ask the question, but I think it was implied that there's a real skill set to go between agency and client side. And I think from a client perspective, it's amazing to be able to just really dive in and get deep under the skin of the brand and the company that you're working for. You know it inside out, you live it and you breathe it. It's just, you know, you know everything, and you really understand what works, what moves the dial, you know what good looks like. You get all of that from an agency perspective because you're working across multiple clients. You know roughly what good looks like, but your good is defined in a different way. You have, from an agency perspective, your work, because you've got this kind of diverse range of clients, you have to prioritize, you have to multitask, you have to do all this stuff, and you have to be really good at dipping in and out of different projects. From a client side, you are dipping in and out of different projects, but it's all for the same brand. So it's a completely
Yes.
different skill set. And because you understand the business inside out, you're able to prioritize better what what you can and can't do. From an agency side, everything is a priority because you're being paid by a client to do it. So that it's not for everybody to go between client and agency. Some agency people really get bored being on the client side. Some client people find it absolutely overwhelming going onto the agency side because it's just too much. And also the dynamic between being the client and having a client, it's not quite the same
Yeah.
as having stakeholders internally. So you have stakeholders, but you're all pulling in the same direction. You've got an agency and you've got clients. It's a slightly different dynamic. So that's a very
Yeah.
rambling answer. Sorry.
No, that's a fantastic answer and really interesting. I think one of the things I've noticed consistently across friends of mine who are agency side, I've never worked on the agency side yet, is it can be very demoralizing that you do all of this work and then nothing happens. You make a fantastic plan and then the client doesn't implement it. And you're like, well, did I just waste my time? Going back to even like when you were a bag carrier, how do you keep the creative people excited about the work they're doing when you have to come back and tell them like, oh, the client actually doesn't want to do this brilliant idea you came up with?
It is a massive challenge. I mean, it's a massive challenge. I think what's really important to acknowledge, clients don't pull campaigns because they think they're rubbish and they don't deserve to go live. They pull them because priorities have changed, budgets have moved, something's happened internally. So I think that's the thing that everybody needs to focus on and keep your eyes on that fact. I think it's very easy, especially like I said about creatives putting all their passion and their heart and soul into a campaign, then it not happening is kind of a killer. But as long as you just need to try and get them to focus on the fact that it's not them. It's not about them. It's about a different story and a different narrative. And that's why it's been cancelled. Yeah. And actually, literally, because I'm very literal, literally, taking them out, having a few drinks, like kind of commiserating. I think it's kind of a grieving process, right? So you birth this big campaign between you all. It's not about, and then it hasn't happened. I guess there's a drop in dopamine or something, and all the feel good things go away, and you just feel rejected and neglected and sad and awful. So I think you have to acknowledge that. You can't, you just not, it's not just move on. It's like, right, let's take a minute. Let's acknowledge
Yeah.
this. Let's acknowledge it as a team because it's not just you individually. It's for all of us. And actually it's for the client as well. We've all invested lots of time and money in it. So we need to really just work together, grieve it, and then move on.
Yes. And that's interesting because we sometimes are tempted to try to say, like, oh, this is work and this is my personal life and I keep it separate. But you're so right. If you're doing really good work, it is personal and you can't just say, oh, business is business. You need to take that time to mourn and then move on to the next thing and put your energy into that and keep going, even though the last one didn't work out.
Yeah, I did a thing when I was at eBay years ago, an offsite called the Energy Project, and it's very much about that. So if you run a marathon and you're afterwards, your body is in pieces, right? Of course, most people. So you take time to recover. You let your body recover. It's the same thing when you have an emotional hit. You need to regroup. You need to, if you have a disagreement at work and there's positive disagreement, right? And then there can be stuff that you can take quite personally. Take yourself out of that space, give yourself some time to recover. It's the same thing. It's
Yeah.
all about recovering, getting your energy back, and then refocusing.
One of the things that I've found most fascinating about AI is, when you're working with someone, whether it's a person you're working with, an agency you're working with, whatever the case may be, there can be a temptation to say, if this isn't working out, it's that person's fault. Like they're not good at their job, they're not good at whatever. When you work with AI, it becomes very real very quickly that this is my fault. If the AI doesn't give me what I want and it does give them what they want, then I need to improve my prompting skills. It's very clearly me, not the AI's fault. And I think that's often true of these other human relationships. It's actually, some of it may be their fault. A lot of it is, how do I prompt them? How do I connect with them? How do I onboard them well? What do you think are the biggest mistakes that client side folks are making when they bring in an agency and then say, oh, this agency's terrible, it just didn't work out? What could they have done differently?
That's very introspective, first of all, Nate, that you acknowledge that when AI doesn't work out, that you need to look within. Uh, I'm not sure that not that many people would acknowledge that. Anyway, I think, well, you know me, so you know everything starts with a brief. It's got to be a good brief. So and it's not, it's a real skill to writing a good brief. And if you're not sure or you're not getting what you need, then you should sit down with the agency and make sure they've got what they need. So it's about having the right brief, which has the right information, which has a clear single message in it. It has clear goals that you want to achieve. And it has something really structural that an agency can respond to. The second thing is you've got to do that brief face to face. You can't don't email it to somebody. It's what you write and what I read could be two totally different things. Because what I'm reading, you know what it's like? You could have an appraisal and you hear some people will hear only the good stuff and none of the bad stuff. Some people will only hear all of the bad stuff and take it really personally, but not take any of the good stuff. It's very similar to reading. You read something and what your takeout of what you're reading, what my takeout would be nuanced. So it's only
Yeah.
when you talk through that brief that you can really accentuate what's important and the priorities. And now with AI, if you record that meeting, AI will also pull out, not independently, it will take out the key nuances you're talking about without any of the kind of human bias in there. So you've got, get the brief right, do it face to face, make sure that you get across what you really mean. So the person on the other end listens to it. They can ask their questions. You can also adapt the brief a little bit because that's not quite right. This is right. And with AI now, that can really help to get that point across. So I think that's super, super important. And then one of the other things that people tend to do is choosing an agency because you like the style of their work. If you're choosing an agency that has a style, you're buying that style. If you're choosing an agency that can perform and offers all sorts of different, you look at their portfolio and it's really diverse, that's an
Yeah.
agency that can respond to a client brief. And you can be
Smart.
going for either. You don't have to, it's not that one is better than the other, but you need to acknowledge that. So if you're looking for
Yeah.
somebody that is flexible and dynamic and agile and can respond to your brief and to your brand, then you probably want to go for the one that's more diverse. If you are so specific and drill down to what you need, and there's an agency that does that, then do that. But don't get the two muddled up. There are so many times that clients say, oh, it's 80% of the way there. And that 80% is, I bought the style that I like. That's great. But the 20% is the important bit, which is, but you're not delivering to my brief because you're not going the extra mile that I need.
Yes. It brings me back to some of those days when you were reviewing my briefs. I think I learned a lot of how I would brief, hopefully still from what you did. I've probably corrupted it a bit since then. But that element of what's the one thing? Because it's so easy to put a whole bunch of things in and not be really clear on what's the one thing I need to communicate. But if you have multiple things, the campaign is not going to go well. They will try to communicate multiple things because that's what you told them to do. And it's not going to be clear to the end user.
Absolutely. It's what I say to people all the time. You can't be all things to everyone because then you become nothing to anyone.
Yes.
So you
Yes.
need to, we say pick a party, pick a dress and go for it. So pick your target audience, pick your key message and go for that.
How long should a brief be? Like, let's say I'm building a new campaign for Burger King in the US. Should I do a 2-page brief, a 30-page brief? Where would I start?
So we always had Einstein said, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it yourself. And then if you extrapolate that, if you can't if you can't explain it yourself, you don't understand it yourself, how is the person you're briefing supposed to actually understand what you're talking about?
Yes.
So I've kind of got two answers to your question. First of all, you should have a brief. That very top line is very key, very clear. Who you're talking to, what you want them to know, what's your single-minded message, and what are your KPIs. But supporting that brief can be any amount of information. But that brief should be the blueprint to any campaign that somebody's working on. So somebody comes back to you with some proposals. You say, right, okay, how does this stand against my brief? Does it have that key message? Does it respond to that KPI? Does it talk to that audience? And if the answer is yes, then you're clear. And that's good. If your answer to yes of all of that is you're on the right track, then you might go, well, actually, I really want to reinforce, and it'll probably be a reason to believe. I want to reinforce the trust here. I want to reinforce the expertise, and that can be dialed up a little bit. But if you don't start with that clear, single-minded brief, then you're not setting yourself up for success. So I think the more background information, the better. Agencies love to know what's worked previously, what we tried previously, what hasn't worked, and there can be a hypothesis just because something hasn't worked. It didn't work because it was COVID. It didn't work. It was purple. That it doesn't, just because it hasn't worked, you don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But it's just really good to have as much context as possible. But that the actual brief needs to be clear, focused, single-minded, and short.
It reminds me actually of some of the work, because most of my work now is in analytics or in research. And when I'm doing an analytics project, I always start with a very clear question. And it's almost always just one sentence, maximum two. But it's so helpful to then go back and say, okay, here's the work we've done. Does this answer the question? Oh, this is an interesting thing, but it's actually not related to the question. So let's not bring that in. Or we haven't quite answered the question. Let's go into this other direction. And it just is very, very clarifying. Same thing from a creative perspective.
Do you remember the why? We used to talk about it.
Remind me. I've probably forgotten.
Well, it's the heart and soul of every brief. Why should your target audience care? Why? Why should they listen? Why should they get involved? Why? So why? Because they want to do better. Why do they want to do better? Because they have career goals. Why do just keep going down? Why? So do you remember the digital garage?
Yeah.
We went around trying to name Google Digital Garage. And the whole thing was like, right, okay, so we want to train 1 million people in 6 months on digital skills and give them digitals. Well, why would they want to do it? Because they'll be trained. But why? Because they want to be more skilled. Why? Because they want jobs. So what do they? And we went round and round and round. And in the end, we identified that people wanted to have their own tool sets and access to their own tool set to be able to be able to evolve and be employed in this digital world. And we came up with Digital Garage. And that's where the heart and soul of the name Digital Garage came from. We had Step Up and we were like telling people how they could get to the next level. Level Up, I think, was one of them. It took about a year. It took as long as to get the name that it took us to train 1 million people to get the skills. But yeah, Digital Garage. And it stuck. And it stuck because it's the right name and it's got the right answers why. So why? Important question that you need to ask yourself when you're writing a brief.
And it's fascinating how something that is like as simple as a name, obviously not simple, but as detailed as a name can have a big impact. When you really understand the why, you name it properly, everything else just works more easily. Versus if you name it slightly wrong, you can still push the rock up the hill, but it's going to involve a bit more pushing because it's not as optimized.
It goes back to having the right why in the brief.
I want to pivot slightly. If someone is considering hiring agencies and they would like to get better at hiring agencies, you mentioned the two different types of agencies. I pick for style or I pick for they can address my problem clearly, even if it might be a different style between the different jobs. What else should a client be looking for in choosing a good creative agency?
We did a lead magnet on this, so I'll share it with you and you can put in the link to this.
Oh, I love it.
Chemistry is super important. Yeah. And understanding your team, they go hand in hand. Quite often agencies will roll out the big guns and then you don't see them again after they've won the pitch. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I've met some of the big guns and I'd rather work with the teams, frankly. So that's warning to agencies as well. But yeah, check out your team, make sure they're the ones you're going to be working with. And then check the chemistry with that team, see how you get on. It's difficult to judge how they might take feedback, but if you have a rapport and the chemistry feels good, then that's a great thing. Talking about the diversity of their portfolio, I don't I personally don't think that an agency has to have industry expert. I think you can have an industry agnostic agency, and sometimes they're the better ones because they can bring all sorts of perspectives from different, just do things differently. But that's not to say that specialist agencies aren't great as well. I just so look at that and kind of really think about what you need. Yeah, their body of work, client references are always really important, and listening to what the client, what that reference says is very important. Kind of, there's everyone that reads between the lines, but ask the questions that you need the answer to for how you want to work with them, and see what people respond with, because that can be quite telling. I'm trying to remember the top 10 tips. So there's chemistry, there's work, there's testimonials. I think they're probably the main key ones. I think that you probably filtered down from that.
If you're building,
I struggle with pitches. Clients don't understand how much work and money it entails doing a pitch. It can cost an agency, I think it's a minimum about 10 grand of time. You have to pull a team or teams from other paying projects to pitch on something. When it's a 3-way pitch, it's huge. You've got your strategist, you've got a creative team, you've got a creative director, you've got the sales, you've got loads of people working on these pitches. And I think it's not fair if you're not prepared to pay for it. And I think people do tend to use that quite willy-nilly. Chemistry meetings are really good. Understanding somebody's approach to a brief. How would you approach this? What would you do? What's your thinking? I think getting to the bottom of the thinking is a much more cost-effective way for an agency to be able to demonstrate to you how they think, obviously, without having to invest all that time in doing creative. So that's a good way of assessing how good an agency, or not how good an agency, how well you're going to gel together. It's like, okay, so you'd approach it like that. Actually, that's what I'm looking for. And that's always a good thing. How they communicate and how they listen. I think listening is so important. From a client side, I've done a lot of chemistry meetings where agencies have either talked at me, they've not asked me any questions, or asked me questions, which is lovely, and then gone into their pitch without acknowledging any of the answers I gave them. I've also been in ones where they've what's it called? Smack talked. Is that the right expression?
I'm not sure.
Well, it's expression, smack talked the agencies I'm using. So
yes,
and then talk them down. And I'm like, whoa, hang on a minute. I literally said to you, we love this agency. We don't want to break them because they're doing so much work. We need an overflow one. And now I still don't know if it's the right word, smack talking them. Straight away. You don't want to work with people like that.
Yes. It's interesting how similar it is to interviewing. Like, if you're interviewing, you also want to know, how does the person think versus the skills that they can learn? How do they work with other people? How's the chemistry? It's not all that different.
It's exactly the same, because with interviewing, you assume that they have, first of all, you've got their CV. So with an agency, you've got their creds and you've got their website. So you can assume their level of expertise.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just about their approach and how you actually get on and how you can work together as a team, because an agency should not be perceived as a supplier. They are a partner. They're an extension of your marketing team. And that's when you really succeed. That's when you win.
What percentage of the time in agency engagements do you think the agency is perceived as a partner rather than a supplier?
Not enough. I don't know. Actually, I would prefer it was 80-20, but it's nowhere near 80-20. It might be more like 60-40 to the partner side, in fairness. I mean, clients are generally really good. I think the issues arise when it's that pressure that's going on in the background. So it's different personalities. So how somebody might react to the pressures they're getting from the C-suite, and then that tension comes up, and there's a kind of lack of transparency, which I think comes down to this kind of chemistry, the relationship, and a not starting thinking they are part of my team. They are partners. We're in this together. And I think that agencies can be the same. So how to be your agency's favorite client? Be really open, be transparent, give them proper visible timings. Tell them if you've got a budget, or at least a rough idea about what you want to do. Just be the openness and transparency and having direct line of communication then makes you feel like a partner. So actually, when I answered your question, that 80-20, thing and the 60/40. I think that actually 80% of the time there is that transparency and that openness. So that is really, really good. I was thinking more of like literally a partner, but yeah, I think that yeah, 80%
That's
of the time
wonderful.
people, yeah, it isn't. We're a good industry. I think we're good people.
That's fantastic. Speaking of finding good agencies, going one level deeper, the challenge for I think every agency is finding good employees to work at the agency. And that can be a very competitive space. I believe often very short employment times, moving a lot between agencies. How does an agency owner build their staff in a way that doesn't change over every 6 months and is really good people who can work across very different types of jobs?
Company culture. It's all about company culture and chemistry. You know, like it's the same with any business over. And I guess agencies are possibly a bit more like startups in a funny way. So
Hmm.
super people come to you for your culture. It's very, very competitive, as you said. You need to get people that are bought into the culture, that they work together well as a team and they feel very fulfilled and appreciated and, creating work that they really love. So there's a bit which is slightly out of your hands, which is the kind of clients you have. But your
Fair.
client will also, your logos will appeal to a certain kind of creative or account handler anyways. And not everyone wants to work for gaming. They're quite happy. Some not happy to do fintech and insurance. And so it's not like it's really difficult to get people for the, I don't know, cybersecurity software. People really love all that stuff. So that kind of broadens things. It makes it more level playing field for agencies that don't have such exciting clients, in inverted commas. But yeah, it's all about chemistry, culture, teamwork. It's the same as any business. But yeah, when you're trying to scale, or if maybe you're trying to scale and you're trying to find a few people it's not that easy to find talent, the right talent quickly. And actually trying
Yes.
to do it quickly is probably the biggest mistake you could make, because that's when you do make the wrong hires.
How do you maintain that? So let's say I find a really good person for my agency, but I'm very dependent on client work. And if that client work goes down for 3 months, I can't really keep paying that person. I need to let them go and hopefully rehire if I get more jobs in the future. How do you bridge that volatility of client side, which then brings volatility to the employee side?
Well, there's two things. First of all, you can't really run an agency like that, because if you did, everyone would feel insecure and no one would stay.
Fair.
I think rather than doing it that way, you need to make sure that you've got a very tight ship, and you can account for those quiet times if needed. Like any business, you need to have a full view of your funnel. You need to know what's coming in. You need to be constantly hustling for new business, net new,
Yeah.
and know where it's coming from. You can't just wait for it to happen and then kind of go, oh no, what am I going to do? That's just not going to wash. So like any business, an agency has got their funnel. They've got net new, they've got retained and recurring clients, and they have to have
Yeah.
full visibility of that and manage it. So that scenario that you've just described doesn't happen. The
Fair.
other thing is having a really solid network of freelancers, because there's lots of freelancers out there. So if you suddenly find that you need to scale up, you're in the position to be able to do that. So it's not about scaling down in lean times. It's about being able to scale up in happy, making hay while the sun
Yeah.
shines times. It's much
Well,
more
that's
about that.
fascinating. So look to freelancers to scale up. If you look at an average agency at an average time, how much of the agency work should be done by agency people versus freelancers? What's a healthy balance?
So you want everybody to be permanent employees. So if you suddenly start to need to scale up and outsource to freelancers, then you've got a good CFO in place. See, how is that a trend that's going to continue? Because you can see your whole funnel. If it is, you use the freelancers to stop that gap while you recruit to fill in that extra space. So you grow you take the opportunity to grow. You use freelancers to do that, and freelancers freelance because they like freelancing. So it's not like, and there's always an opportunity if they wanted to have a permanent job. It's not like they're
Yeah.
excluded if they wanted to. You grow that way. So it's actually like any business, you shouldn't be trying to spend. We're not trying to spend. There's not a formula where you should be spending double the amount of money on a freelancer for 9 months a year, because that's not sustainable. It's about working out where that curve is going. Is that a long term trajectory, or is it a short term bump? And then planning around that.
And when you look, because you've been an agency founder, you've run Relish for something like 20 years. Is the founder role primarily to be good at marketing or primarily to be good at sales and client management?
That's a really interesting question. I think it's both. I think you need to fundamentally understand for an agency owner or founder, you need to understand marketing. Because you need to be able to know what good looks like, what a good job looks like. I mean, timing, if you can't do that. So you do need to understand marketing. You do need to understand client management and basic kind of project management skills and be able to make sure what's prioritized, make sure that the client's happy and all that kind of thing. You need to be a really good communicator and have an open door and always for everybody, because communication needs to go both ways. You need to have that really holistic view. And yeah, did you ask me about sales and business development? Because you have to have
Yeah.
that's not that, it's about relationships. There's a very small proportion of work that comes through net new from a cold lead. People come to you because they know you, they like you, they enjoy working with you, they know what you can do, they like your work. They don't come
Yeah.
to you because they've just found you on Google and it looks like it might be a good idea.
Yeah.
And you've got the rule of seven anyway. So they're likely to see you on Google, look at LinkedIn, ask people. They're going to want, I've already said to you, you should always get references, testimonials, right? So they're going to do all of that stuff. All of that all feeds back into having your network and a good group of people that you enjoy working with. So yeah, so I think all of it, basically. I think you'd struggle to
You've got to wear all the hats.
have expertise to be able to run any business that you're the industry that you're in.
How would one get started in the industry? Because it sounds like a lot of it comes back to network, which once you are in and you're operating, you hopefully have that network and then it's a matter of sustaining it and growing it stably. But how do you go from 0 to 1 of, I don't have that network. Maybe I'm good at marketing, but I would like to do an agency. Maybe I'm a freelancer and I want to become an agency and like work with other. How do you get from 0 to 1 on the network side?
Build it and they will come, Nate. Build it. I was great at that. Uh, you just need to get started. It might be,
Yeah.
it might be that your mate, and I'm literally mean your mate, might want to start an agency and says, Nate, I want to start my own agency. Have you got any work? And you say, well, I could give you this little project. And that's how it just starts there. And then they do a bit of work and then they've got a logo and they've got a testimonial. And then you say, oh, my friend does this. And it builds. It doesn't happen overnight. Really doesn't happen
Yeah.
overnight. I mean, when I started, Lord, it was just after the Ice Age. And so when I started out, I was young, green behind my ears. God, I probably never would have done it if I was my age now. I came from a big agency background. I didn't have any client contacts. We literally just went, we're going to do this, and started reaching out to people. And it was through a friend of a friend who ran an agency who needed some overflow work, who introduced us to Ubevco at the time, who did San Miguel and Dosaki. And we ended up working on San Miguel, which gave us the logo. And then we ended up working on DreamWorks. I don't even remember how we got DreamWorks. And that was we worked on Shrek, the first ever DreamWorks movie. They were, in fact, I think that's what it was. They were, the upstarts. They were turning the industry upside down and they wanted an agency that was turning the industry upside down. So they chose us, which is incredible. So we end up working on that. And then, you have DreamWorks and it opens doors to Universal Pictures, which opens doors. And, so before you know it, you've got eBay, and the rest is history.
That's incredible. So, and one thing that stuck out to me from that is you approached other agencies to look for overflow work, which I wouldn't have thought of that. I would think, oh, these are the competitors. Let me approach the companies. But that's an interesting approach to say, hey, you already have the work. Do you have too much? I can help you out.
Yeah, I mean, marketing and agency work is, you got to have the hustle. It's all about hustling. So actually, I just remembered we had Monster, the recruitment website, and that was a school mum.
Wow.
Kind of, having a little dinner party with the suburbanites, having a chat. Oh, we can do that. And there's a little bit of chutzpah and hustle and just putting yourself out there. I think they're the three things.
It's amazing what you can accomplish when you just say, okay, I'm taking on this audacious goal and I'm just going to keep pushing and I'll hit rejection hundreds of times and then I'll hit 101 and it'll be a breakthrough. And next thing you know, I'm working on Shrek. It's
I'm not
incredible.
going to lie, there were dark times and there were plenty of afternoons wasted in the pub. Well, because you've got to reward yourself. That
Bro,
energy project, giving yourself the space to recover. Yeah. Touch wood.
that's incredible.
I don't think I wouldn't do it differently. I might do it better. I'd learn from my mistakes, which of course there are plenty, but I wouldn't do it differently.
And the thing that someone mentioned, I forget, in some book or something I read that has stuck with me is when you go through something like this, it's hard. Remember that everyone else has to go through it also. And so this sort of gives you a competitive edge that you've gone through the pain. They might not want to go through the pain. And now your agency is better positioned versus all the other competitors.
That used to be in the dark times, that was our mantra. If it was easy, everyone would do it. In the
True.
bright times, it was build it, they will come. And they'd be like, if it was easy, everyone would do it.
One of the things I feel like is secretly the meta skill behind every skill is project management. How important is this to running an agency?
Really important because it's all about trust. So you wouldn't trust me with your project if you didn't think I could manage my way out of a paper bag. So it's project management's really, really, really important. There's not necessarily being an agile project manager or a Sigma six, or I don't really know all the terms, but just, yeah, there's so many different elements because with any project, you've got, of course, you've got the getting the brief, you've got the strategizing, you've got the content or copy, you've got the creative side, you've got the production side. I mean, you've got the analytics side at the end. There's like 7 or 8 different steps to the whole process. So you need to be able to project management through the whole of that. Project manage through the whole thing. And you need to do that in a timely manner. So you have
Yeah.
to be able to project manage, and you have to communicate every step of the way. Everyone needs to know their roles, the expectations. You have to be super organized. I think that quite often people think I'm not that organized. I don't come, but you have to be. That it's just like trust in their expertise and trust that they can project manage, because if they can't, they wouldn't be here.
Yes. And I feel like, to me, I'm curious how you would evaluate success in this. To me, the two things I've noticed are, number one, do you do things on the timeline that you say you will do them? Whether it's long or short matters less to me. Of Dan, do you simply deliver when you said you would deliver? And then the second thing is, I've noticed that someone can be very competent at their job or at their agency work, but if they don't give updates, then the client or the manager or whoever might not know that they're competent and might not trust their work. So sometimes, even if I'm very confident, if I also give you a weekly update of, hey, here's how we're doing on the project, that can build a lot of the trust. Is there anything else that shows up when you're doing project management well as an agency?
I think for me, there's a big part of those weekly updates, or they could be bi-weekly. I think it's tied into the listening piece as well. You do the project management, you have a face-to-face meeting or an online meeting, but it's still face-to-face, right? And
Yeah.
you listen to what the client's saying, because there's always moving pieces. So you'll be working on this project, but Nate's suddenly got this priority from here. So it's like, okay, does that come into this project? How
Yeah.
do I run that in? Or actually, if this is a long-term relationship, because we're in a partnership effectively. Okay, so you go away, you carry on doing the projecting. I've been thinking about that thing that you said, and it's not upselling. It's part of that partnership and being like, I always think an agency's role is to make the client look good. So it's like, right, okay, you've mentioned this in passing. It might not be a thing, but I've had this thought. How about we do this? You kind of go, brilliant. Hold that thought. I haven't got the budget or time. Or, oh my God, that's great. Let's do that. And I think I think it is rolled up in project management. It's holistic project management. And I think that's so, so, so vital. Of course, it can lead to new business. So it's good from an agency's perspective anyway. But that's not my why for doing it. The why for doing it is because that's what it is to be a team and to support each other and do as best job as you possibly can.
And I remember when I first started as an employee, if someone would bring like a manager or an important stakeholder says like, oh, we also need this, then I would just go do it and stress myself out and work late or whatever. And then as I grew as an employee, even, I realized actually maybe this isn't actually a priority to them, or maybe it's more of a priority than the thing I was previously prioritizing. And so rather than saying, okay, I can carry the whole world, I can just go back to them and say, hey, right now I'm working on A. You mentioned B. Would you like me to do B before I do A? And then you get a really clear answer of, actually, no, I don't care about B. Or yes, B is more important. Keep deprioritize A. It brings better work-life balance. It potentially brings new work for an agency, and it makes sure that I'm actually doing what they want and don't come back with B. And they're like, oh, what was that? Oh, yeah, I forgot I mentioned that.
So I find it, so yeah, I mean, it's the same the world over. Just being good at what I think it's being good at what you do and having professional pride and wanting to be the best you can. And that does involve listening, supporting, being proactive. So proactivity in that project management, I suppose, is what I was getting at.
That is. How do you keep track of all those things? Because I know for me, I forget a lot. And I can only imagine if I were an agency lead and I'm holding on to 5 different clients and trying to remember the new project from each one that I want to mention in our next conversation, I'm probably going to forget half of them. How do you remember these things?
I do everything in writing. I have listen lists. When it comes to, I mean, everyone's different. So I've got people in my team, and I encourage the team to. We don't have hundreds of different platforms because that's just infuriating. But we find the one that works for us. But what has always worked for me is a simple spreadsheet. So every week we have a client catch up on the spreadsheet. I list everything as we are. So it doubles up as a status, an agenda, dumping ground. And then as I have thoughts, I put it back on that spreadsheet. So one single point of truth, which has everything in it. So I'll have my notes at the end or on a different tab. And then we can update it as we go through the status meetings. We can add things. We say, oh, so you said this last time we had a meeting. So that's how I do it. But I think everyone does it differently. Some people use Gantt charts. I
Yeah.
struggle with that because I just like it simple. I keep it simple. I keep it lo-fi, and it's all on that. But everything in writing. If you don't put it in writing and you don't have it in one single place, that's really key. Then you're not set up for success.
What tabs would you have in the spreadsheet? Or like what sections would you have in the spreadsheet?
I change them all the time. So it's always the the tab. Well, so mine would be like a really simple table, actually. So you'd have your thing. I have what's happening, and then I have deprecated, and then I'll start a brain dump with notes. And then if we're doing, say I was working with you on this podcast, and so we'd have our say, so this is who we're talking to, this is what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. Right. These are the ones that have been done, and these are the links to them. And then these are the thoughts. So I might think, oh, Nate should speak to Lyndon Nicholson at Future Present because he's great at storytelling and he could tell you all this stuff. I'd make myself a little note and then on a different tab. And then when I came back, I'd be like, oh, I've had this thought, or when it was the right time. Because sometimes we have a half-hour catch up and we haven't got time to talk about new ideas. But then you plan a new ideas one. You go, well, I've got this new ideas tab. And here are the things. And you also could go, Sarah's got these, I know she's got that tab. Just gonna have a little look, see if she's had any thoughts. So it's there. It's really transparent. But it's all, I'm a big believer in having everything in writing, which everyone has access to so that they can just dump things in there. In fact, so quite often I'll have a tab called dump, which is
Oh, I
just to
love
dump
that.
ideas and things in. You might say something, you might share a link with me. It doesn't really have somewhere to go. It can go in the dump. And then I could go, sure, he mentioned that somewhere. And I have it captured.
Oh, I love that so much. I feel like I agree with you that Gantt charts and all these fancy tools can sometimes become the main thing instead of the main thing being the main thing. And so for myself, I actually have a spreadsheet also that just has literally 4,000 links and it's like text so I can search and find the link I'm looking for. Super basic. But for managing things, I'm still looking for the way I love to do it. I haven't found that yet. Maybe in another decade, I'll have found the way I love to do it. Or maybe this will
Well,
become
let me
that way.
know. Because we're very like-minded. So what works for you probably work for me.
True. This brings us to the end of the interview, but before we close, I have a lightning round. So I'll throw out some very brief questions, give a brief answer or a longer answer, up to you. The first one, cross-functional pod chaos or department measurement clarity?
Is that a question?
That was a question. Let me make it was a very long question. Let me make it more clear. Do you want cross-functional alignment or cross-functional engagement rather, or super clarity on one single source of truth?
Cross-functional. It takes a village. I don't say it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to build a business. So you've got to have every stakeholder's voice. Every stakeholder has got to feel involved. We've got to have cross-functional alignment, 100%. We also need clarity on what we're trying to achieve. We should all be aligned on that. But there's no point. So many businesses have marketing going off. Marketing are very aligned. The rest of the business isn't on board, but marketing knows what they're doing. That's no good. You need cross-functional alignment.
Full-time CMO or fractional CMO?
I think that depends on the quality of the CMO. I think you could,
I love it.
at the oh, do you know, Nate, this actually opens a whole new can of worms because how am I going to put this? Okay, so I think that CMOs that businesses really need, they need experienced, proper CMOs, not heads of that they're calling CMOs for whatever weird reason, and not performance marketers that they're calling CMOs for whatever reason. They need CMOs that have a proper broad background from everything from brand to performance to like omni-channel, everything. And not everyone can afford that. And so I think a fractional CMO fits that gap. and a good fractional CMO who properly has that experience. That's what I mean by good, that really can cover all of that and has had CMO as a job title before becoming a fractional. I think that that can work really, really, really well for businesses that can't afford a full-time CMO. And I think that there is a big risk at the moment in this industry that people can't afford CMOs. So they're calling people who aren't CMOs, which is devaluing the job title. They're not getting what they need. It's then giving CMOs a bad name because they're calling the wrong people CMOs. And it's just killing the whole thing. But they, on the other hand, it's because they don't want to employ a proper CMO because they can't afford it. So get a fractional one, people. Get a fractional one.
Agency
I don't feel
partner?
strongly about it at all, obviously.
Agency partner or in-house team?
Right. Well, I think both can work really well. I think an in-house team tends to be, and I'm going to get shot down in this for saying this, I think you have that risk of they know what works. They are actually, you know what? I've had in-house teams. They know what works. They are under fire from every department. Everyone wants something. They end up almost being a production artwork arm. So either you outsource production artwork and let your in-house team be creative, and that's different skill set. And quite often, really good creatives don't want to be in-house. They like to be at an agency and really flex their muscles across different clients. So I would lean that way to have the creative agency externally and in-house have more of a production artworky, responding to the data. You need a one pager or one sheeter in 48 hours for something that no one will ever use. Don't spend thousands of pounds with an agency doing it. Get your in-house person. I mean, God, one sheet is the bane of my life. Oh, send me one. It's the biggest put off ever. Send me a one sheeter. I'll put it in the drive that no one ever looks at. Oh, let me do that for you, please.
I love it. I love it. Where can people go to learn more about you?
LinkedIn.
Fantastic.
That was simple, wasn't it? Sure. LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I'm all over it. I've got a newsletter, post all the time. Yeah, that's where I am.
I love it. That'll be in the show notes below. If you're watching on YouTube, check the YouTube description. And if you're on the podcast, check the show notes. Sarah, thank you for coming on the show. We need to do a part 2. This is wonderful.
We should do it more often, Nate. It's been a while.
We really should. It has.
Thank you.
I will pause our recording